How's it going, YouTube? Comments and today another video, and today, guys, what the brand new is going to be the update for Suda and how to beat the meta, the things that I'm expecting, the things that you should be running in your main and your side, the better board breakers, the better hand traps, just trying to keep you as up to date with the meta as possible. We already know this game changes week to week, and Suda format is coming up, especially for Orlando, and that's going to be a major event. So you want to be ready for it, and I want to make sure that your practicing is actually accurate and very strong. And that's one thing that's going to be really important going into an event like this, is that you have accurate information as far as to what we know. But if you do enjoy this video, definitely go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Check out my sponsors over at Imperium, Dragonshield, Gem, Cloud, RW, and Grimoire. And just know that we are aiming for our 30,000 mark. That's going to be such a milestone. I'm so excited. But without further ado, let's hop right into the video. The first thing I want to talk about is what actually changes post-Suda. A lot of people were talking about, like, oh, this crazy thing in Suda, this other crazy thing in Suda. But, like, what actually changes? So, ALIN, which is a set after, is going to be very impactful, right? Like, that set's going to be insane. But Suda, it has some really good cards and a couple things that are definitely going to come up in events. But at the end of the day, Suda is not going to be a super crazy high impact format. It's going to be in addition to what we already have. So yes, we get a couple extra pretty crazy power cards to add to our decks, but like realistically nothing changes too much. We get a Balakui. This card's pretty crazy. It's a reborn. So this is specifically made, I believe it was for Evil Twin as like their support. Which is really funny, and it actually works really well with the archetype. But this is a card that we're going to be seeing, obviously, in other decks and other situations, because this card is fairly good. A reborn for any light and dark that you want, or just a non-targeting destruction. So overall, a very amazing card that I'm definitely excited to use post this new format. Twins of the Eclipse, this is going to be a huge buff for Ryziel. We're already seeing this a lot in the Mitsurugi deck, so they can keep looping things like King of the Feral Imps. That's going to be something where you want to make sure you have Droll. But Twins of the Eclipse is definitely very interesting because it makes the Detonator a little harder to out as well, because you kind of have to out it twice. But that's why you really need to be on a lot of Bistals, because Twins of the Eclipse, if you get rid of either target for Twin, the card just doesn't summon at all, whatever they're going for. So very important to know that, even if you want to play like DD Crow, just in case your opponent has no monsters on board. You also could be on Bell. Bell's really solid for this as well. But Twins of the Eclipse, definitely going to be able to give your opponent a lot more grind game than they really need in the deck that's already very strong. So I would say, if anything coming out of the set is going to be the highest impact, it's going to be Twins of the Eclipse. Now, as for Muals, this is definitely just going to be mostly a Malice hate card. So you can draw Muals or you can draw Lancia, which is pretty rough. And we'll talk about my take on Malice post-Suda soon. But Muals is going to be a really solid card. It does really well into things like Fiendsmith. It does really well into Malice, but it's going to be one of those cards where you might side like two of it if you have it, but I don't really think that you're going to go out of your way to get a playset of this for the event. You could, and it's going to help you a lot against certain matchups, but at the end of the day, you know, we have Perulia, Fua, now we have Muals, so you kind of have to determine what you really want. Although Perulia kind of fell out hard from the format, but people still side it. I could see them siding the Muals over a Perulia. The Perulias will probably hit like 30s, especially because we haven't seen the reprint yet in Stampede. So, like, hypothetically, if Perulia hits 30 and we still don't have an announced reprint yet, I might be inclined to just drop 30s on Perulias in case they go back up and they're not reprinted in Stampede. But there's always risk when you go to do that, right? But I do foresee the Perulia dropping and potentially people maining Fua and siding the walls moving forward. But Orlando is going to be very soon after the set drops, so I could also see that people only play the copies that they pull. And there's going to be a couple days to be able to get these before the event, but not everyone's going to be able to get those right away. So I wouldn't really stress about it if you don't have them, but if you do have them, you'll probably run them. And then Mitsurugi, this deck is really cool. My last tier list, I talked about it being more like tier 2. I've been seeing a lot more plays with the deck now. I think that it's pretty solid and can actually make an impact into the format. So we'll have to wait and see, but it also really depends if a lot of people start playing Droll and a lot of Bishals. I think that going into Orlando, playing a ton of Bishals is going to be the most ideal way to go about this format. Especially if you're dealing with things like Twin of the Eclipse, I think Bishals are definitely the move, and you should be on quite a few of them. Now, here are your best decks of the format. Ryziel Fiendsmith still number one. It's going to be number one. This is going to be the deck to beat in the room 100%. But the Ryziel Mitsurugi deck is also going to be something that you're going to have to look at, learn, and understand how to beat that deck. And a lot of it's going to be Droll. That card is going to put in a lot of work for you. And we'll talk about other side cards that I think are going to be really important going into this format because of decks like this. The other thing is going to be Malice. Malice is still one of the best decks in the room. Fiendsmith or the Hand Trap variant. I like the Hand Trap variant over the Fiendsmith cards. I just do. I think that it's a lot better. I'm playing Heat Soul in my list too because it helps you play through Lancia. It gives you another way to go ahead and just draw cards because, of course, if you're drawing into your Nibirus, your Veilers, your Ashes, if you're on Impulse, your Impulses, right? Those are the things that keep you alive. Those are the things that help you play through the turn that you're Lancia'd, get back to your turn, and absolutely OTK your opponent, right? Malice is a fantastic deck, and I do not think that's going to change anytime soon. Then we have the Tenpai Fiendsmith Striker deck, i.e. the Triff deck. This deck is still doing very well, and I've seen a lot of people picking this up. Deck itself is very scary. It can outright just kill you out of nowhere. So that's one thing where you're going to have to respect that. And, you know, Droll does help with that. It really does. So that's another thing where I'm like, you know, maybe maining Droll is a really good option in this format. So keep that in mind because even if you hit your opponent with Droll and Ryziel Fiendsmith off like an Engraver, right? They can't add off any of the Ryziel cards. They can't duo drive. So you're in a lot better of a position and the board is a lot more minimal. And you got to realize that Droll isn't always just going to be the turn ender you want it to be. Sometimes it's just going to make the board a lot more minimal so that you can just deal with the board. And sometimes that's just enough, honestly. Sometimes that's just perfect because you're turning off the Necroquip draw, you're turning off the cross draw, you're turning off like a regain draw, right? So the deck is able to gain so much advantage, and being able to turn off these different instances of gaining that advantage is really important. Now the last one here I actually swapped out for Yubel. I think Yubel is now outside the top 5 decks. I don't believe that it's even that great right now, especially into all the hand traps that we have. But whether you're playing Pure or Fiendsmith Memento, I think this is a top 5 deck right now, truly. The deck itself is fairly cheap if you're just playing the Pure variant. The Fiendsmith variant obviously is going to be money because Fiendsmith cards, but Memento is a deck that you should be looking at. It's a deck that you should be picking up if you don't want to play or pick up the other ones, whether it be your playstyle or just the fact that they're pretty expensive. I totally understand, but even like a pure Memento list, I think it really does some damage into a room this format. Is Malice dead post-Suda with Lancia and Moals? Absolutely not. I've heard so many people say this deck is just absolutely dead. 110% Malice is still going to be an amazing option moving forward. Again, we already know how to deal with Molcharmies. You play Ash, you play Called By, and then if you really want to, you can side like Cross out, but you just have to make an absolutely minimal end board to really make sure that you're going to be okay into these situations. And, you know, some things you can even do like a Link Devotee line if you really need to, if you're worried about like Moals, right? So there's definitely a few different things that you can do to go ahead and play a little bit better into these situations. There's already been multiple ways of talking about how to play around the Lancia. I have a lot of theories myself, and I think that going into Orlando, if you understand that these two cards are going to be in the room and these are going to be the number one enemies, then you're absolutely fine. I think it's hilarious that you can play a deck like Malice, talent look at your opponent's hand, see a couple Bishals, and be like, sure, right? Like, those cards don't matter, right? So I think that this is one of those decks that will stay being incredibly frustrating to play against, and it has an incredibly high ceiling. And if that's something that you really enjoy in a deck, Malice is a deck for you, and I think it's going to have a really good shot going into the next format. Now, for the best hand traps of the format, Impulse is back. This card is absolutely insane again. Last format, of course, this card was not doing a whole lot. It really didn't perform at the level that we wanted it to. I think Impulse now more than ever, especially against Mitsurugi, is one of the best cards that you can have in your list. It is so phenomenal and it stops so much. Imperm is Imperm. We don't really got to go over that. Droll could be a main deck option in this format, and I think that's always a crazy format whenever you're like, man, what if I just main deck Droll? And it's really not even that bad right now. So I really do like Droll next format. I think that it probably should be in your main deck, if not in your side deck. The card is really strong. Bishals, again, I really do think that you should be on like 6 Bishals, right? Whether you're maining some and siding some. I think that those cards are going to be the format definer as far as YCS Orlando. It's whoever has more Bishals in their hand, because that's going to be countering the Fiendsmith engine, the Tsurugi engine, and so on. And those cards are very, very good. And then, of course, you need Ash to answer Molcharmies, amongst other things, too. So I've seen multiple lists already main decking Thrust, which is crazy to me, because I only really like that back in, like, Math when you have Super Factorial, because you have an absolutely main deck blowout that you can just go ahead and set anyway. Right now, it feels lackluster if you're not really doing that. But there's a lot of lists right now maining Talent and Thrust, which is crazy. Thrust is just such a phenomenal card, regardless, being able to get the cards like D-Barrier and what have you. D-Barrier is already like a card that should have been banned a long time ago, but here we are, right? Eclipse, I think this card's like tier 0. This card's absolutely broken. This format and next format and the format after, I'm sure. Book of Eclipse, it just is so strong. You should be maining 3 of this. You should be siding 3 of this. Find room in your list for Book of Eclipse. Card is absolutely phenomenal. Dark Ruler is specifically just against the Mitsurugi boards. I really like this because the boards can get pretty large. You're still going to have to deal with like cross, and then your opponent's still going to be able to bring back the amino to have it back on the board. But you still force out a lot of interruption, and then if your opponent does bring back the amino, that means they're using a monster effect, and that also means that you're able to use cards like Thrust and Talent. So Dark Ruler kind of just forces it out. Usually if their board's that big, you weren't killing them anyway, so like using the Dark Ruler is fine, because it does just proc your opponent to really do a couple things, and then you can go ahead and start activating your power spells, which will eventually end up just winning you the game outright. So that's something else to keep in mind, but I think these are going to be your best board breakers this format. Now for the last slide here for the best side cards possible. Thrust is the #1 side card right now besides Lancia, and I don't think that's ever going to change at the moment, because Thrust gets you into the actual #1 side card, which is Dimensional Barrier, right? Barrier is just such a stupid card. It's insane. You flip it, you win most times. That's why you need to be playing these engines in your deck where, like, if you get D-Barrier, Call Exceed, you're like, cool, I'm just going to do Mitsurugi combo. Then if they call Ritual, then you're like, I'm just going to Ryziel combo, sure. So that's why it's really important to be able to run more than one engine in your deck to make sure that you don't lose to cards like D-Barrier outright. And that's why Thrust is just so good. You can just get to the cards that you need to get to really quickly, or you can go ahead and set something defensively and you won't just outright lose. Book of Eclipse, again, needs to be in your main, needs to be in your side, needs to be somewhere. Book of Eclipse is just like the best card in the game right now, in my opinion, besides the Barrier. Dark Ruler, again, just from Mitsurugi. Solemn Judgment, I feel like this is a staple 3 of in your side deck, whether it's Judgment or Strike. I like Judgment a lot more, but it's definitely going to be up to your discretion on what you want to do with that. But I think either or, Judgment or Strike, they have to be in your side deck as a playset, at least one of them, because they are both performing so well right now. Bell, because you can hit Prayer and the rituals that are trying to come back to the board, and then you can also hit the effect of Twins of the Eclipse, which is really strong. So there's a lot of different applications for Bell this format, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. Usually you wouldn't side 3 of this, it's just going to be like a 2 of, so that's something else to just keep in mind. It's going to be a rotation into a different hand trap. Let's say you want to take out like Ogre and put in Bell, something like that. I really would recommend having Bell on your sideboard, though. The card is really solid. Zombie World, again, this is just going to be really fantastic against the Mitsurugi cards because they have to tribute reptiles, and this will turn the cards that they have on board and in their graveyard into the zombie type and not the reptile type, which is really solid. You can also use this against Malice. You can use it against Ryziel. It's really awkward when everything's a zombie, right? So definitely recommend this card. I think that it's really strong, and this is definitely going to be more of a budget option, but it's something that you could consider. Lancia, we don't really have to discuss that. It's just really good into Malice. It's also good into Crystron, though, so something else to keep in mind. I think that deck's really cool. It's like high tier 2, but I don't really know how much it's going to do. The deck isn't really like that impressive. And then the last 2 are pretty similar to each other. Mistaken Arrest and Shared Ride. They do the exact opposite. I like Shared Ride because everyone's adding a ton right now, And, you know, this is just one of those cards where if they're adding from deck or grave to their hand, then you're just getting so much free advantage, right? Shared Ride is one of those cards that can absolutely ruin someone's day because they're trying to combo and they're under max C, essentially, right? And it's one of those things where you're drawing to so many hand traps, so there's just not enough interruption that they can put up or play through to where you won't just have more interruption for them, right? Like, you're just not going to lose at that point. Especially if you're drawing the cards like Nibiru and then you get like Nibiru Vele, right? You're just like, all right, I don't lose this. So that's pretty crazy. Shared Ride is absolutely phenomenal for that. And again, this is chainable back row, which is premium. Because if anything just gets blown up or even lead, you're like, that's cool. Anyways, chain this card, you lose, right? That's pretty nuts. And then we have Mistaken Arrest. And I think this card is so good because it just doesn't play into thrust or talent, which is fantastic. And it's another card that just goes ahead and just shuts off your opponent from everything immediately. This card has proven itself to be just so strong in and out of different formats moving forward. I'm sure it will be even better. And, you know, again, chainable premium back row. We love to hear that. But I do hope that this video helped you in terms of getting ready for Suda and YCS Orlando if you're going to be there. If you're going to be there, come up to me and say hello. I would love to meet as many of you as possible. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed. Join my Twitch, Twitter, Discord, Instagram down below in the description. And I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.